Super quick question here. How many tabs do you have open right now? If you're like me, it's a lot. And if you're running a business, it's a lot more. And with all those tabs, you're spending more time searching through data and less time, growing your business. But HubSpot's customer platform brings all your tools into a single powerful place that your teams can use together. So close those tabs. It's business growing time. Visit HubSpot.com to get started today. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thursday, September 12th. I'm John Weigell here with Juliet, Bennett, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. If you ever looked at a grain silo and thought, that looks pretty dangerous, you're not wrong. Many farmer deaths and injuries from silos have inspired startup Weevil to replace humans with robots in large grain bins across the country. So how much have they already raised, and how will these new bots be useful to the farming industry? We'll chat about that in a bit, but first let's give you the hits and headlines in business and tech. To start off, Campbell Soup Company is planning a rebrand after 155 years, a long time coming. Investors will vote on a name change to The Campbell's Company in November to reflect a diversifying product line. Slight change from Campbell's Soup to just Campbell's, but I guess if they want to make more foods and not be so based on soup, then go right ahead. From there, we go to Starbucks. Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol wrote in an open letter that he has plans to get the company back to its, quote, community coffee house roots. The first Starbucks opened in 1971 in Seattle's Pike Place Market and had much more of a coffee shop vibe than it does now. Juliet, what do you think of this we're going back mentality to the cafe of old?
Yeah, I guess I wonder how they're going to do that because, the average Starbucks consumer today is not somebody who gets a drip coffee and sits down and works on their homework or meets a friend. It tends to be people who are ordering these elaborate TikTok recipes online.
Yeah.
Frappuccinos with 19 syrups and, then going somewhere else. So I guess it would be interesting to see. I mean, they used to have like Starbucks music CD compilations of people who just wanted to vibe.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, if you just wanted to listen to Michael Bublé for 15 minutes to an hour. Yeah. And also Starbucks, as of late, has become really popular, at least in the United States, with its drive-thrus. And I wonder how that equation allows for a sitting coffee house community type vibe. So, yeah, not sure how it's going to work.
Yeah, they're just not very cool. I think they would have to really remodel and make them look like today's coffee shops that are cool, which are less overhead lighting and more plants.
Yeah, more plants, more baristas with tattoos.
Yes.
They need all that. They could do something similar like what Barnes & Noble did, which was go from a corporate-looking bookstore to kind of be a neighborhood bookstore again. So we'll see how that works out for them. Over to Hawaii. A Hawaii newspaper company is using AI-generated anchors in one-paper social accounts, a move that its unionized journalists call digital colonialism. And yeah, it's pretty awkward to watch. You should check it out if you have time. Moving from Hawaii to another state, Nevada. Nevada paid Google $1.3 million, a little more than that, for AI tech to speed up unemployment rulings amid a backlog of 40,000 appeals. But some experts worry AI hallucinations or errors could make things just worse. And finally, in some fraud news, victims reported $5.6 billion in crypto-related fraud last year, a 45% spike from 2022, according to the FBI's latest report. Investment scams, in particular, led to $4 billion in losses for victims. Be careful out there. Okay, on to the main story today. I'm not the most savvy on what exactly a silo is or what it does. All I know that it seems like a pretty dark and dangerous place that causes a lot of injuries to the farmers who use them. So, Juliet, can you tell me about what the main issues with silos are and why we need some technology to improve them?
Yeah. So if you're not somebody who grows up in a farming community, I don't think you think much about silos at all, to be honest. But yeah, they're these big towers essentially where grain is stored. It keeps the grain away from pests and all these other things. The problem is that sometimes people have to go into the silos. And they will do this for a variety of reasons. They will do something called walking down the grain. They'll level the grain. They'll have to break up clumps that can occur if there is moisture in there, if grain spoils. So basically you'll go in there with a shovel or you'll go stomp on the grain, as far as I can tell. The problem is that if that grain is unstable and it shifts, like maybe it's moving too fast from top to bottom, or there can be something called a grain bridge, which is when like you get these clumps of grains and then they give way. Oh. Even though it's grains, it's often corn, you don't think of it as being like quicksand, but when you are in the silo, it has been described as quicksand-like.
Wow.
In that it kind of sucks a person in. And it's very difficult to get back out of, almost impossible to extract yourself if it's past your knees. And what is even more horrifying, now that I have read all about grain entrapment, is that it's not necessarily that you get sucked all the way under and then you're suffocated by corn. It's the compression of the grain that suffocates people and causes these injuries. Ooh. And even if you're on a harness, it can actually be hard to pull someone out without injuring them, because that is how intensely you are entrapped or engulfed in grain. And rescues can be very complicated and they don't always work. There have been several fatalities, and sometimes even if someone is rescued, they do sustain serious injuries or trauma from being trapped in grain, which sounds very, very horrifying.
That does. That honestly sounds like a worse fate than being buried alive. I feel like just endless grain all over me sounds terrible. So a lot of farmers have gained injuries, and there have been quite a few deaths because of this.
Right. And a lot of them are teens, like teen farm workers, like very young farm workers too.
Uh-huh. Right. Because they're sent in there because they're the most agile and they can get in and out, presumably the easiest. But, I'm sure it doesn't always work out that seamlessly. So kind of given all this information, given how silos are a bit dangerous, what is this company doing that I mentioned up top? This company, Grain Weevil, what are they doing? How are they introducing robot technology in order to kind of help out with these processes?
So what's interesting is that they actually have no agricultural background whatsoever. But Chad and Ben Johnson, that's a father and son team, they do live in Nebraska. And so Ben, the younger of the two, has always been interested in robotics. He's an electrical engineering major, and he had built a robot that could follow a guide based on their shirt color. So like if you were a tour guide, you have a little robot buddy. And in 2020, according to an interview I read with the pair, a farmer friend was like, hey, cool robot, can you make me a robot that can go in the grain silo instead of me? And they're like, all right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they set to work on this robot called the Grain Weevil that basically you can put in a silo and it will level the grain. It will break up clumps. This first version is equipped with a camera and a remote control system so that it can be controlled by a human, although there are plans in the future to try to get a more autonomous bot. And what's interesting is there's a movie called Silo that is about a teenage boy who becomes entrapped in grain. And like apparently the whole town has to come together to get him out. And it's loosely based on a true story or something like that. I'm not going to watch it because grain entrapment horrifies me. I actually did grow up in a farming community, so I was familiar with this before.
Oh, so you've known of this as a potential fate for a very long time.
Yes, yeah, I have.
Okay. I definitely... Oh boy, I can't put you in a Final Destination movie.
No, I also have a lifelong fear of a log truck because of Final Destination, obviously.
Just a log truck.
Yeah, a truck carrying logs. Everyone who's watched Final Destination is forever afraid of being stuck on the highway behind a truck carrying logs. It's just the rule.
That's how it goes.
But I know that farms are dangerous. Like I grew up with people who were killed on farms, and it's not just necessarily being stuck in the grain. You could fall off the silo. People have had limbs amputated by augers. If you are inside of the silo and you're not wearing a protective mask and you're breathing in all those fumes, like the grain dust, you can get a condition called farmer's lungs. So essentially, this team, Chad and Ben Johnson, they went to a local screening of this silo movie about the kid trapped in the silo. And they were like, hey, we've got this robot we're working on to prevent things like this from happening. And they got like a ton of comments from people who were like, yeah, why don't we have a robot? And then someone posted it online on like Twitter or something. And then they got hundreds of more comments. They're like, yeah, why don't we send a robot? And like, yes, duh. Like this is such a dangerous thing that people do where there have been fatalities. I don't want a robot to generate me a picture of a cat playing a banjo. I want it to save farmers' lives. Like this is such a no-brainer. Yes, why don't we have a robot for this? So that is the Grain Weevil. It's like this really niche product that you don't know much about unless you work in agriculture. But once you hear about it, you're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's very smart. We always talk about like modern farming technology and what that looks like. And this could definitely have a place in the modern farm as something that everybody needs to use. I also love, I must point out how absolutely genius their marketing tactic was.
Yeah.
Finding basically a movie that shows how horrible this thing could be and being like, do you want that not to happen? Why don't you buy this robot?
Yeah.
So, very smart on their part. Pretty good.
Yeah, I think it was just like a lot of serendipitous things, like the kid being into robots, and then, somebody being like, why do you make this? And then I guess it was like a local corn growers association was screening this movie. Like, just really all came together. And now they've raised, this spring, they raised $3.5 million. They've been trialing at commercial grain facilities, and they are hoping for a 2025 commercial launch.
That's awesome.
And if you're like, I got to see what this robot looks like, there is a video that we link to in the newsletter.
More tech like this, honestly. I would appreciate more stuff like this. Very applicable, very useful.
So practical.
Very practical. Yes. I do not need AirPods Pro Max 5. This will do.
You know what? I love it. Yeah, I want to know more things like this.
Exactly. All right, and that'll do it for us today. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. If you're not subscribed, go get signed up at thehustle.co/email and give us a follow on Instagram, and we'll see you tomorrow. With access to so much information, it's hard to feel like an informed, discerning citizen. That's why Make Me Smart, a podcast from Marketplace, makes it easy for you to stay in the know. Each weekday, hosts Kai Rizdal and Kimberly Adams unpack the latest from DC, explore the day's tech news, and they make sense of the economy. Because in a world that's constantly changing, we all need to stay smart. Listen to Make Me Smart wherever you get your podcasts.